You said something super interesting to me the other day, Clay, that I wanted to follow up on. You were talking about, in a more of a general sense, actually, what a fan of Disney you were, not just in terms of content, but in terms of things that we can learn from them from a business standpoint. I think even potentially producerially. What did you mean by that? What do you see in Disney, and what can we learn from what Disney's doing?
So they're incredibly corporate, which is a really not a terrible thing when you want to run a massive entertainment empire. And a lot of what happens here in New York is not corporate, which is also, it's got its own pros and cons.
Oh.
I try and take a little bit more of a corporate approach because I do feel like that helps with scaling in size and in scope. But I worked for the Walt Disney Company in the cruise as a cruise line performer, on the ships. And I was in a leadership position there within the cast. And I would go to these meetings with, the higher ups on the ship, and they would be talking about the ratings, what people are taking away. I learned the stat of if one person makes a comment about something like the staircase was closed midship, on average, 10 people thought it. And so it's very important now when I hear someone say something about a show I'm working on, or if one person in the room says that copy doesn't make sense, on average, there's 10 more people in the room thinking about it that aren't speaking up for whatever reason.
That's awesome.
But it's very important to be a really keen listener, because those, like breadcrumbs, right? You have to pay attention to them. Anyway, so I learned that from Disney as well, but also in the way they kind of organize their MO, their method of operation, having, safety being number one. That's very first. First is safety. Courtesy, being extremely courteous to the people you're working with and those around you. And that's all shareholders. That's a casting agent. That's an investor. That's everyone gets treated the same way. This is also in the Conscious Capitalism book. The guys with Whole Foods, they treat the guy delivering the meat the same way they treat the customer at the front of the store. And for some reason, a lot of us put on different faces and hats when we talk to different people in different departments in theater. I make sure that I speak to everyone exactly the same way. And then show, that the show is excellent and just top-notch talent, top-notch. Everyone's giving the best they can possibly give. And then, of course, efficiency, being incredibly efficient, minimizing drama. It's no place for that in the workplace. We have that with our personal lives and our families, but when it comes to the business of putting on a show, we are just simply to the point to get the product on. And then on top of that, I really like to give a voice to the kind of the two aspects of this whole thing that don't have a voice for themselves, which is the show itself and the audience. And at the point of the audience having a voice, it's typically too late in terms of what they're buying or not buying with their ticket sales. But so often in this process, we all kind of just get in our own way a little bit, and we want to make sure that we put the show first. Every single decision that's being made is not for the person who wrote the show, not for the person directing the show, but for the show. So that's very, very important to remember that. Almost like keeping an empty seat at the table to remember the show is what we're talking about and putting on.
What's interesting about, and I'm assuming this is what you mean by corporate approach, like you're talking again with a sense of, like you said, scale, like you're using the term we a lot. We, it's like that. You view your collaborators and you as, a large unit, and not just the current collaborators you have, but any future collaborators. There's a sense of legacy and a sense of scale, as you've said. I'm assuming that that's what you mean by corporate approach, and that these core values remain consistent. They don't, it's like we're talking about with persistence, right? Like, it's so easy to kind of be like, whoa, like, but like, when it's like, no, this is what our standards are. This is how we operate in all capacities. And of course, there's adaptability and learning in that, but like, we stick to it. This is what we do. Is that sort of
It's exactly it.
That humanizes that term for me in a really strong way, that it's like, it values, consistency, and scale really is what I take away from what you're saying. That's awesome.
The biggest part to this whole thing is that good leaders create more good leaders. They don't create more followers. Wow. And the whole point of putting on these shows and the people that I work with is that I'm creating more independent thinkers. I'm constantly empowering all the partners at all the companies and all the people I'm talking to think independently and to grow individually, because as a result,
Wow.
all the ships rise with that tide. So it's never a,
Wow.
the Clay show. My production company is in Clayton Howe Productions. It's Rock's Edge Entertainment. I want to have a separation from myself and the we of it all, because you can't do this alone.
Sure.
And the only way you scale, like really scale, is in that, having those independent thinkers.